Hi, I'm going to be presenting to you the story of polio and the iron lung machine. This is Health for Niger Presents. This is health education content. It is not medical advice. So, what we need to know is that polio virus attacks the nervous system. Polio virus has been around since ancient Egypt. What is polio? Polio is short for poliomyelitis. It can be a crippling and potentially fatal infection caused by the polio virus. This virus enters the human body through the mouth and exits via the digestive system. So, record keeping in the United States from 1935 showed an increase in the rates of polio. This led to the then President Franklin D. Roosevelt to take action against polio. Interestingly, FDR had contracted polio in 1921 when he was 39 years old. So the fight against polio was personal to him. He started a patient aid fund to provide care for people with polio who could not afford care. He urged that an organization be formed, which is now called March of Dimes, and that organization provided funding towards what became the first polio vaccine. This was created by Dr. Jonas Salk in 1950s. Now, this is a story that I'm going to tell you where in 1955 in the USA, there was an outbreak of the viral infection. So what happened at the time was called the Cotter incident. In 1955, some batches of polio vaccine given to the public contained the virus, even though they had passed required safety testing. This case was which came to be known as the Cotter incident, resulted in many cases of paralysis. The Carter incident was a defining moment in the history of vaccine manufacturing in the United States and government oversight of vaccines, and led to the creation of a better system of regulating vaccines. After the government improved this process and increased oversight, polio vaccinations resumed in the fall of 1955. So let's go back to polio. How do people with polio present? So, most people who get infected will not have any visible symptoms. But out of four people, one person with polio infection will have flu-like symptoms that can include a sore throat, fever, tiredness, nausea, headache, and stomach pain. These symptoms usually last 2 to 5 days, and then the symptoms go away on their own. A smaller proportion of people with poliovirus infection will develop other more serious symptoms that can affect the brain and spinal cord. So meningitis, which is infection of the covering of the spinal cord and or the brain, occurs in about 1 out of 100 people with the poliovirus, depending on the virus type. Paralysis, which is inability to move parts of the body, or weakness in the arms or legs or both, occurs in 1 out of 200 people to 1 in 2,000 people, depending on the type of virus. Paralysis is the most severe symptom that's linked with poliovirus because it can lead to permanent disability and death. So between 2 and 10 out of 100 people who have paralysis from poliovirus infection die because the virus affects the muscles that help them breathe. Even children who seem to fully recover can develop new muscle pain, weakness, or paralysis as adults 15 to 40 years later. This is called post-polio syndrome. So you'll hear polio, you'll hear poliomyelitis. It means the same thing. Polio is the shortened form of poliomyelitis, and it is defined as a paralytic disease. The outbreak of polio in 1955 led to some people requiring the iron lung to breathe. So we have here an illustration of someone in an iron lung machine. This iron lung was first used for a patient with respiratory failure from polio in 1918 in South Africa. And then the technology was used in the United States in 1928 and then in the UK in 1934. So we can see how at the time this was pretty advanced for that time. In this current era, we do not use this iron lung. People who have respiratory failure are put on the vent or the vent machine. So how did this iron lung work? So the air pressure in the iron lungs chamber changes to mimic the air pressure change within the human chest cavity when breathing. So when the pressure decreases in the iron lung, the patient inhales, takes a deep breath in, and when the pressure increases in the iron lung, the patient exhales, takes a deep breath out. So Alexander Paul Alexander was 6 years old when he contracted paralytic polio in 1955. He became paralyzed from neck down. He required an iron lung to help him breathe. He managed to attend law school when his breathing was better during the day, when he was in his younger days. And he managed to write a book using a pencil in his mouth. It took him 5 years to write this book. As he got older, it became more difficult for him to function. He depended on the iron lung for his breathing. Sadly, he passed away in March of 2024. He was the longest surviving man in an iron lung. So currently, we know that there is no cure for polio, but polio can be prevented with vaccination. So in the United States, it is quite routine for children to get their polio vaccines at these times: 2 months, 4 months, 6 months through 18 months old, 4 to 6 years old. Now, most adults have been vaccinated against poliovirus during childhood, but if the adults have not been vaccinated, maybe people who did not have access to healthcare as kids, they can definitely get vaccinated. And those who are planning to travel to areas that are high risk for polio should consider getting vaccinated against polio. So polio was one of the most feared diseases in the United States, but thanks to vaccination, the wild polio virus has disappeared in the United States. Globally, most countries have embraced robust vaccination campaigns and have also eradicated polio, except for 2 countries. Now, if you want to get more information about polio, you can go to the CDC website, cdc.gov, and under search, type polio. So thank you so much for listening. Please share this video, give the video a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. And see you in the next video.